Lee. All right, so it is.
Where you need to go.
Do we have him in the view line there with the barrel? And,
Okay.
Okay, everyone. Thank you for coming. Most of you know I'm Jen. I oversee the library's Pennsylvania room, and this is my good friend Lee Porter. What, Lee? 6, 8 months? I don't know. A number of months now.
Long time friendship.
Lee strolled in with one of these, this Meyersdale Brewery bottle, which, as he'll tell you how he came to discover the brewery bottle, but he wanted to know more about it. So he came to where everyone should come when they want to know more about Meyersdale, our library in the Pennsylvania room. So Lee strolled in and we started digging. Sam Sharp, our volunteer, was there. She helped him. She was a big help in all this. And after a day or two of digging, I looked at Lee and I said, you know, Lee, maybe you'd like to deliver a presentation on the Meyersdale Brewery. It's our 150th year. We're trying to, you know, tell more of Meyersdale's stories. And Lee very graciously agreed. So I'll turn it over to him, and he's going to give you a very interesting presentation, and you'll leave knowing a lot more about the brewery than you ever thought you would. So thank you very much, Lee. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks. It's great to be with you all, and it's quite an honor actually to actually participate in anything related to Meyersdale, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. My wife and I and some friends started riding the trail about 12 years ago, 13, maybe 14 years ago. And we kind of fell in love. We kept coming back and coming back and coming back. And then we started thinking about, I wonder if we could find a place up here that would work in our budget and could be our little place of safety and haven and rest and refreshment. And we did. And so we have a home in Summit Township, but we look down on Meyersdale. We look right over Catholic Hill up on Michael's Road. And so we've just been thrilled to death to be here, have enjoyed your community so much. My wife Sue is from York, Pennsylvania, so she's a genuine Pennsylvanian. You can probably tell that I'm not. Now the fact that I'm a Southerner kind of crept up on me. But I realized that there's some things about being where I'm from that I can't hide. So I know you'll tolerate that. But I grew up in a town of 449 people in eastern North Carolina where we farm and mine phosphate. Different kind of mining that you guys do up here. But some of the dynamics I grew up with are very similar. And all my family have worked in the mine, except me. I was the black sheep of the family, went away to college and never came back. But doesn't mean I don't love it and don't love the family that's still there. So my intention tonight is for you just to enjoy this, relax. I'd like you to invite you to ask questions. I don't mind being interrupted, and I don't consider it an interruption if you have a question. I also want you to know I'm not an expert. You guys bring to the story of the brewery a lot more than I do, not having been here and not grown up here. And so I want to do this in an honorific way because you represent family names like Sailor and other names that might come up. And I'd love for you to think mentally, if you see something that you can connect with and help me follow another rabbit trail. I don't consider it a rabbit trail, but I'd like to know that because there's many things about the brewery. I have a lot more questions than I have answers in some respects, but all that work in the Meyersdale, in the Republican, the old Republican, in the old Meyersdale Commercial, the Somerset County Star, et cetera, there's always unanswered questions. I want to know more. And so as much as you can, help me do that. And I'll continue to add to this. So it's a work in progress, and I don't offer this as the end all and be all of anything. I'm just a learner. So here we go. I wanted to thank Martha Albright for display purposes tonight for loaning 2 of her Meyersdale Brewery bottles, the smaller size that were related to mine. They're both made by the Cunningham glass folks or some of their subsidiaries, typically in the Pittsburgh area, at least at this point in time. No, Ron? No. Kent will know more about the bottles and what happened later on with Meyersdale Brewery bottles. But early on, most of the brewery bottles came from Cunningham in the Pittsburgh area. The reason I got interested was when we bought our home on Michaels Road, I was nosing around in the basement one day, and we don't have basements down south too much, so it's just fun. You know, you never know what you're going to find. And of course, I have to do this nosing around in the basement, so I can't stay down there too long or my back starts killing me. But I noticed a reflection up on one of the walls, and it was the base. And I didn't know what it was, but I kind of put my hand in there and started pulling it out, and it was this bottle. It was just plugging the hole. And I looked at it and I said, Meyersdale Brewing Company, Meyersdale, Pennsylvania. I didn't know there was a brewing. I didn't have a clue. So that's what really got my curiosity going about the brewery, was just finding this bottle in our dear little home that we found. And also visiting the train station, the visitor center up on the hill, I ran into this guy that was donated by Robert and Hope Grew back in 2018, which is one of the original Meyersdale Brewery kegs. You're welcome to come look at this. It is a heavy deal. I moved it yesterday, and I can't imagine. I know they had tools that they used, but these guys that were horsing these things around, this was not play. And you know, to put 31 gallons of brew in one of these things, plus the weight, 31 times 8, plus this is at least 50 or 60 pounds. That's a lot. So have a look. But I wanted to thank Martha and thank the Grews for being part of this in their own way. So this was the ad in the 1902 Republican, Meyersdale Brewing Company, the beer that will make Meyersdale famous. And of course, who came up with that slogan about 10 years before that? What was the beer that was going to make Milwaukee famous? Schlitz. So, but there was this consortium and kind of cooperation among all the breweries across the nation at that point in time, where they were sharing a lot of advertising ideas, et cetera, et cetera. I'll talk more about that in a second. But anyway, so the thing that was going to make Meyersdale famous was Meyersdale Brew. So welcome to this. I wanted to share a few big ideas because the brewery didn't happen in a vacuum. Sometimes in small communities or small towns we may feel like we're in a vacuum, but most of the time there are larger forces at work that sometimes we do not see and sometimes we do not understand. But they still have an impact upon us. And I just wanted to share a few big ideas. I won't go over all of this. That kind of impacted the development of the brewery here. And it was part of some trends that were happening all over the nation at that point in time. Until 1850-ish, beer was not the primary alcoholic beverage of consumption in the country. It was, beer was produced more or less in the British style. It was ales and porters and stouts. They fermented quickly, they had to be more or less used quickly, they didn't travel well, so a lot of production was pretty much localized. The thing that was happening as an alcoholic beverage of choice was truly whiskey, which again fed what became the temperance and prohibition movement a little bit later. Somerset County produced a lot of rye. Guess what the rye was used for? Famous Pennsylvania rye whiskey. And it was easier to transport whiskey than it was to transport bushels and bushels of rye. Also, it became used as kind of a barter for people, an exchange mechanism, a currency of sorts. And it was estimated in the early 1830s, there was, in Somerset County, there was probably a still on every 1 in 5 farms. And a lot of the time that was a cooperative production. It was a group of farmers, neighbors pretty close by that operated a still and produced whiskey, not only for their own consumption, but also for use in barter and selling in other places. What happened though in 1850, as several things are converging, the Industrial Revolution, immigration, especially from Germany, Ireland, the British Isles, other places in Europe, we begin to see these immigration patterns influence what's going on with alcoholic beverage consumption in our country. And with German expertise and then the Industrial Revolution providing refrigeration and the ability to cool the fermentation process more effectively, we see the development of lagers. And the number of breweries just exploded from 1850 up through the early 1900s. There was one 20-year period between 1850 and 1873 where the number of breweries in the country went from 400 to over 4,000 in 20 years. So again, a lot of that was immigrant expertise, especially from Germany, using mechanical refrigeration for the first time, because a lager beer has to be fermented longer at cooler temperatures and then kept cool for the most part. And so refrigeration and the production of ice became very, very important in the producing of lager beer. The good news that happened with lager, as opposed to ales, porters, and stouts, lager beer had less alcohol content. So it became kind of a temperance beverage. And you'll see that in some of the ads I'm going to show you in a little while. It became a way of kind of saying, hey, listen, drink this, this is a good temperance brew, as opposed to something that had a higher alcohol content. Lager also traveled better, especially with the coming refrigeration and the production of ice that you'll see. And again, 80%, I've got that here, 80% of the breweries, these new breweries, were operated by first and second generation German immigrants. And you're going to see something about that related to our brewery here in a little bit. All right? So we started drinking beer and in the United States. And so from 1865 to 1914, per capita, we went from 4 gallons a year to 20 gallons a year. That's a huge change, a huge shift. Brewery worker conditions were typically hard, but better than other industrial jobs. Brewers were quite organized. The Brewers Association, Western Pennsylvania had its own Brewers Association. It was very active to promote its own form of temperance drinking, as opposed to the harder realities of pure prohibition. It would later lose that fight for a while, we'll see. And so the movement you will see is embracing German science, promoting new things we've learned from Europe about refrigeration, about fermentation, etc. And that begins to influence all breweries, even the smaller ones, of which Meyersdale was one. So, and one thing to keep in mind, whenever I'm going to show you some ads in a little while, always keep in mind that from about, especially 1870, 1880, all the way through to Prohibition, the temperance movement and Prohibition are always in the back of the mind of every brewer and every brewing association. And they're always thinking about that. And that influences a lot of the things that they do. And of course, we all know that with the coming of World War I, that may have been one of the factors we don't talk much about in school that influenced Prohibition was, again, the brewers had kind of elevated the importance of German science, German thinking, German techniques, et cetera, et cetera. Then, of course, World War I kind of comes along and kind of drives a nail in the bed. And German, as a matter of fact, associating with German Americans became problematic, association with some breweries became problematic, and became anti-patriotic at some point. So that begins to play into what's going on outside Meyersdale that actually influences what happens here. All right? And again, alcohol production in Somerset County was robust early on. And again, like I said, you could take 1 bushel of rye and create 11 quarts of whiskey. And that's a lot easier to transport. 1 quart versus 11 is a lot easier to transport and use as barter in other ways. There wasn't quite the moral and religious sentiment around alcohol consumption at that point in time until we became excessively oriented toward drinking whiskey. And then that became, then it became more and more of a problem. And then you have faith groups and others begin speaking out about that. And again, those early seeds of temperance and prohibition are formed back in the early 1800s. All right. I wanted to show you, this is from the Meyersdale commercial in 1914, just to give you a sense of what's going on here in Somerset County. So 1914, right as World War I's emerging, we're not in it yet, but Somerset County, every year you had to have your liquor license approved. Somerset County had 85 total applicants in 1914, and again, 74 retailers, 4 brewers, 6 distillers, 1 wholesaler. I just wanted to mention this because the hotels here in Meyersdale, Keystone, Colonial, Slicer, Altmiller, American, and Union, all had bars. And that was a major source of alcohol access, beer access for our residents here. The brewers in Somerset County at that point in time were Meyersdale, had one in Rockwood, Wimber, and Jenner. And then, as you can see, there were more distillers. Of course, we had our own Buell and Gatesman, on Keystone Street. But also in Summit Township, Christopher Johnston was starting to brew. This is liquor or whiskey, etc. So we had 6 distilleries. So again, Somerset County was certainly not dry in any sense of the word in 1914, as late as 1914. Thanks. So, how did so I'm going to use NBC as Meyersdale Brewing Company, just going forward for ease of my tongue. And the charter was applied for by really the Stemler family. Stemler, Ken and I were discussing this earlier. These Stemlers say in their records that they hailed from Germany. And they were the ones who brought the capital into the idea of starting a brewery here in Meyersdale. So Julius Stemler, or Louis Stemler, he had relocated from the Latrobe area. Do you say Latrobe or Latrobe? 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 From Latrobe by 1897. They were here in Meyersdale already, but I don't know what they were doing. I couldn't find that out. But they did apply in 1900, Christmas Eve actually, 1900, they applied for the charter to start a brewery, and it was the Stemlers, Julius and his brother Adam, another person named Louis Mayer from Latrobe, and again, Ken, probably German, wouldn't you think? Yep. Hugo Lorenz, and Edward Leonard. Now, from what I can tell, Edward was a Meyersdale homeowner in 1903. I think he was a local, but I'm not quite sure. The brewery board included a Thomas Rees, who was identified as a distiller in this area. I don't know if any of you know that name. And A.C. Fulmer, both of Meyersdale. So the main capital to start the brewery here really came from Latrobe, but the leadership involved Meyersdale residents. And again, Louis Stemler from Latrobe had already moved here. Now, whether or not that was with the idea of starting a brewery or not, I don't know. I can't tell that. I do know that his brother, though, was involved in the famous startup of the Latrobe Brewery for a couple years, where Rolling Rock eventually came from, that we all know about. All right, Jim? I used a lot of the Sanborn maps, some here and then some online with the Library of Congress. And they're a great resource for looking at town histories and what was where and when. And this, I just wanted to show you this because this is in 1897. And so the Sanborn map in 1897 shows a population. The populations tended to be, on the Sanborn maps, tended to be kind of estimates, they weren't precise. 3,500 here in Meyersdale. There were insurance maps for the purposes of calculating liability for fire. So they always identify what's going on with the local fire efforts or fire prevention efforts. And so we had no steam, no hand engines, 2 independent hose carts, prevailing winds from the west, etc., etc. 30 members, etc. Let's go to the next slide. So I wanted to show you this because this picture was taken a year before that map. So here's your 30 members of the first Meyersdale Fire Company, with one of their hose carts. They had 30 members, 1,000 feet of 2.5-inch hose, and 24 two-way hydrants. So that was what was going on in fire prevention in Meyersdale. But there's so many things you can learn from the Sanborn maps. I just wanted to highlight that one because it connects directly to Meyersdale at that point in time. All right? So, Meyersdale Commercial reported on January 1901, ground is broken by none other than our very own Meyersdale Planing Mill. And what else did the Meyersdale Planing Mill build?
The station.
The station? Building, many buildings. They got the contract for building, I think, all of the Western Maryland train stations. I know most of them, if not all of them. And so this is what they looked like in 1897, located up here on this is Broadway, this is 7th Street, up on the other side of the railroad tracks up the hill. So they were quite a large operation at that point in time. So you had and there was more than one, but I think this was the big dog in town. All right, and they finished it. Listen to this. Now this is amazing to me in these days. These guys finished the entire brewery, including coordinating with the brewery equipment manufacturer by the summer. They broke ground in January, and they were done by the summer. They're going. Our ancestors were rocking. All right. The master brewer, again, Ken and I were talking about this yesterday. Mosmer, probably German, could be, and then Ballman, they were from Brooklyn. So the first master brewers they brought in with this expertise on brewing beer. The main building, I don't want to get into all that, but it was basically 4 stories, 45 by 48. And then they had a 1-story frame building going out the back that was quite long for the engine, boiler, and ice making equipment at that point. They got water from Sand Spring, the water company that had put in the first water system in the town, I believe, in 1888, 1889, something like that. I mean, Meyersdale was a pioneer in water. Isn't that right? Is that right?
We're still using that.
Yeah, wow.
It was 1888.
Okay, 1888. And they also used across Grant Street, I think that I've been told it's still, that the location of the spring is still there. Across Grant Street, there's like some old stones and block work and stuff. There was a spring there by the old Ollinger Yellow House. Yeah. And they also pulled water out of there for use in the brewery. But mainly it was Sand Spring. And man, they did advertise that. That this is pure water, that we use in our products, etc. Their goal was to be able to produce 15,000 barrels annually. Not sure they ever got there, but that was the goal. And the cost of the plant, for you guys to know, back then it was $50,000, which is about 1.8, 1.9 now. So it was not insignificant. It was not an insignificant investment. Most of that capital came from Latrobe. Next.
That's okay.
And again, what fascinated me about this was a really sharp operation. The brewing equipment, the boilers, the vats, all the engines, etc., were manufactured and installed by Vilter Manufacturing Company, which was one of the leading industrial refrigeration companies of its time, and still today. It is still in operation today. And they did all the brewery setup for Schlitz and Pabst and all those big guys, as well as Meyersdale. When they build it, they really build it well for that time and their size. Next one. And of course, this is what it looked like. They say the front is on, there's two fronts, kind of. One facing Grant Street, and then this side, and you'll see it more later, faced the Salisbury Railroad track, the B&O. And then the siding that they put in later. And you can see the brick building. This was wood, and this is at 65 feet long, 45 or so across. And this is where a lot of the boilers and steam operations were in some of the ice plants. So that's what it looked like, all right? And in this, thank you, Donald Watson, who's related to the Myers clan for this picture. The Yellow House, we hear about that. That was built in 1848 by Jacob Ollinger. And you can kind of see, I think Grant Street actually would have been kind of coursing through here. You kind of lose perspective on the distance with the picture. But this is the brewery. This is kind of the back side of the brewery here. So that's why, you talk about the Yellow House being close to the brewery. And again, the spring, I think, over that way.
The spring was down
Was it?
where those looks like grape leaves or whatever behind those ladies. It was right down
Right in here?
down below that.
All right.
See where the little fence is? It was down like a couple stairs.
Okay.
You went down.
All right, great. Thank you, Linda. Super. So that's there's not too many pictures of the brewery. That's why I wanted to show this. Okay. First deliveries. The commercial and the Republican differ a little bit, so I kind of just put those out there. So again, they broke ground in January. They got it mainly built by the summer. They're starting to brew beer in August, and they just started this deal in January. That's a pretty amazing timeline. And their first deliveries were really ice. It wasn't beer. They invited people to come get ice. They'd actually took a wagon around distributing ice because that was going to be part of their business model. Because again, people were starting to use ice. They didn't have to cut it out of the river as much anymore and then hope it lasts as long as possible. For the ice in their, it weren't refrigerators. What would we call it? Ice boxes. Thank you. So they had an icebox business they were going to be involved in, as well as their own refrigeration and cooling processes, et cetera, et cetera. So the first things they actually gave away were ice samples. And they contracted with a guy named Luke Hay, Meyersdalian. I don't know if anybody knows a Luke Hay or a Hay family. He was the one who started the ice business, or the contracted with the brewery folks to deliver ice. And they reported that they were still waiting for the yeast to arrive, and they expected the first beer in September. These guys, again, same thing about ice samples, started brewing in August, expected the beer in several weeks. Okay? I took this, I'm sorry it kind of loses something when I had to blow it up. But this is 17 October 1901. This is the first real confirmation I can get that the beer is actually out there now. But you're still, January to October, you got beer. And guess where it's going? It's now on tap at all the bars in Meyersdale. And they're already branching out to our nearby towns. So, you know, there's a sense of, hey, we're gonna push this out. And again, a lot of the bars were in the hotels. Not exclusively, but most of them, and at least the ones that had licenses that I can figure out. So, next one. So this was one of the earliest ads that I found. Sam helped me with. Patronize home inn, drink Meyersdale, but this is you'll see this gets a lot more sophisticated. But basically, hey, drink our beer on tap at all hotels in the city.
So that's when Buy Local started, huh?
There you go. It's not, you know, our ancestors had it long before we did, huh? Okay. So 1901 to 1904 is kind of a little bit slow. They're just kind of developing their business. They're distributing beer. They're making beer. And I think with all the refrigeration, I don't know this for a fact, but I know they were making ale, and I know they were making porters. And I think with the refrigeration and ice capacity, they were fermenting and brewing and distributing lagers as well. But I couldn't demonstrate that from anything I found. But again, remember, lager, by 1900, lager was 90% of the beer consumed in the country. It were lagers, which are similar to pilsners. I don't drink a lot of beer. To be honest, I don't know why I'm doing this. But I have tried. I don't like lagers. I don't like pilsners. You know, I like porters. But anyway, so they're at work. I noticed this because I wanted to give you a sense. I think Sue and I love coming to Meyersdale because it feels like community. You know, they're just such a neat community feel. And one of the things, a little article I found in the Republican in 1901, Oliver Weller, I don't know, Wellers, I've heard that name, but I don't know. But Oliver Weller was the wagon driver early on. I mean, they've just been doing beer for a month. He's driving a wagon. He's turning with the wagon from Center Street to Main. You know where that is? It's actually cold. They were actually having real winters back then. He slid on the ice, and he had 12-year-old Henry Stemler. Stemler, do you remember the name? Stemler. That was the son of the president and the main funder of the brewery, to the curb. And they had I think from what I can tell, it's kind of like he knocked him out. And they took him into Hartley's store. I've heard of that. I've seen that on the
Where
Murphy's, where the
Yeah.
deputy-
There you go.
over here.
And they kind of revived him. And as they say, he actually got back on the wagon, and they took him home, you know, to the Stemler's residence, because they were living here at that time. And this was fascinating too. I get taken away by little stories. But Somerset County Star in 1902. There was a fellow who, at least the Star says, this guy was an agent of the brewery, and he was living in West Salisbury, Charles Kuntz. And I'm not trying to offend anybody by sharing this story. I mean, I've got stuff in my background you don't want to know. But his home was raided by police because they'd gotten an indication, there were positive indications of an illicit drinking joint in Mr. Kuntz's house.
He had his own bar.
And I just got to share this with you. So this was I love the way the newspapers are written back then, you know. I wish I could write that way, such elegance and craft. But there were 3 officers that went. They found Kuntz, 7 other men, and a boy in the room, some of the men quite drunk, and a number of them playing cards. The officers further testified that they found in the room 4 full kegs of beer and 1 keg on tap that was about drank. Then they saw good news, they saw no one actually drinking it, except a foamy glass, a pitcher, and the drunken condition of some of the men. They saw no money or anything else of value at the card table, so clear of gambling charges. The boy who was present swore he'd been drinking beer in the room, but said, "No one gave it to me, I just helped myself."
Now, there's an entrepreneur.
So they decided, though, to hold Kuntz, to charge him, and bail was posted of $1,000. That's a lot. But guess who posted it? The bail was furnished by members of the Meyersdale Brewing Company, for whom it appears Kuntz is an agent.
That's
So the
right.
beer's getting out. It's just fascinating little stories.
Hey,
I
that's-
don't know what happened to the. He had to go back to court. I can't find what happened. I wish I could. So anyway, a couple little stories, and then things began to change. So I know that in 1902, like I said, they were bottling beer. I think that's lager. That was the term they ale and porter. They built another barn. And they started expanding their stable fleet because, wagons and horses that were used to distribute the kegs. The big thing that happened was in 1904 when Connellsville folks, led by Michael Hurley, I'll talk more about all these people a little later, purchased a controlling interest in the brewery. So the money moves from Latrobe being the source of the money to Connellsville. So the money's coming in from Connellsville, and it described these men as the new men are hustlers and will push the business. That was written in the paper. So it's Michael Hurley, John L. Dixon, P.J. Adams, and T.F. Mahan. They wanted to improve the beer's quality and expand the facility more and induce new dealers for distribution of the beer. So expansion's in their brain. And again, purchase price was estimated by the Star at $100,000. So that's almost $4 million, $3.5 to $4 million, roughly. We'll talk more about how these guys had money in a little bit. Okay, so we've got Latrobe starts the brewery, Stemler family mainly, keep it going for the first 4 years, and then Connellsville business interests come in and take and buy it out, basically. All right. This is what it looked like, the Sanborn map in 1904. Grant Street, and Lynn, I don't know if this is the only house that appears here in this part. I don't know if that's the yellow house or not. Do any of you guys know?
I think it, I think it is.
It
It's
Probably
right
is, but
in
I'm
that-
not sure. But you
it's-
can see that here's how the brewery is looking now. You got the brew house on this side. This is the pink red is brick. Yellow is all wood frame. So you got the brewery house, the stock house, the ice machinery, washrooms. You've got the office off to the side. I think, and here they started bottling. So they started bottling pretty early. I believe somewhere in the 1902, 1903 area. But again, at this point in time, 80 to 90% of the beer was distributed in keg form, not bottles. It says flip today, more or less. So that's what the brewery looked like. Watchman, and of course there was a watchman there. All right. So that's what we're looking at in 1904. Here's an expanded view of the same. And again, for the fire departments and insurance people, there's a lot of code on here I won't go over now, but if any of you are ever interested, I have a key for the Sanborn maps. You can get that anywhere. But it tells you what all the symbols mean, the numbers mean, etc. Of course, this is 4 stories. This is brick. This is 1 to 2 ice machines. This is a wash house, etc. So, and it tells you their power source: steam, fuels, coal, has lights, kerosene oil, town water. So the Sanborn maps are really neat, and we're going to see a couple more of those. But that's what it looked like in 1904. Here's Grant Street. All right. 1905. So again, here comes Connellsville, folks, with a lot of money, new money, and new ideas for expansion. One of the first things they did in 1905, ice house was a 600-ton capacity. That's a lot of ice. but they wanted to expand their beer production, fermentation capacity, as well as continue to sell. Because, you know, the more people using ice boxes, et cetera, the more beer they can sell because they can keep it, you know, et cetera, it kind of feeds on itself. Jimmy Dixon, who was the son of John Dixon, John was one of those Connellsville buyers. He was a mover and shaker. And a matter of fact, one article I found said that he was actually the president. He lived in Connellsville, but he was the president of the Pittsburgh Brewing Company. The Pittsburgh Brewing Company, when it formed in 1899, was a conglomerate of 21 other breweries, some small, some big, including Iron City. And we still drink, well, I don't, but we still drink Iron City brew today. I don't have anything against it, I just don't like that style. So Iron City has survived from that period of time. But Jimmy Dixon, is the son of John, he kind of came, when Connellsville bought it, he kind of moved into Meyersdale with his family and began kind of oversee the operations. He was officially the secretary treasurer, but he really managed the brewery. So Jimmy Dixon, James Dixon, you'll see his name again. John came from Ireland. So here we have, again, European influence. And in 1905, you know, not much more than a year after the new folks had bought it from Connellsville, the quality of the beer is recognized by the United States Health Bulletin as being very sanitary and hygienic and pure. I don't know if the Brewery Association paid them to do that. They said they didn't, but it's suspicious. I have a hard time finding that online in any archives, but it's a true document, and I've got other copies for other breweries, but I think there was something going on. So end of 1905, volume of sales is going up. They then decide, hey, it's time to expand the plant. They bring in a new brewmaster, John Harton. We're going to talk a lot about John. He was a great guy. You'll love John. And they start selling beyond Somerset County. So now they're getting the beer outside of Meyersdale, into the county, and outside the county. And they've got a brewmaster who had experience with other larger breweries nationally who's come to Meyersdale. And he moves in, and he lives here the rest of his life. Neat guy. I'm going to end with his story because it's so profound. Plant expansion, and they're, again, our friends, Meyersdale Planting Mill, doing the expansion. So again, community, all right? The board increases the stock, capital stock to 100,000 in 1906, and then they added another bottling. They had a small bottling machine, but they added another one that could do 10 bottles at a time. Get that? I don't know. The modern ones must be crazy big, you know. And they could actually take the beer from the barrel. They had a 10 spout kind of operation. The beer would come from the barrels into the 10 bottles at a time without losing the carbonation. That was the secret of this particular state-of-the-art thing they bought. So the beer didn't lose anything when they transferred it from the barrel into the bottle. So some of these bottles are probably part of that. All right. 1908, good reasons you should prefer Meyersdale beer to any other. Here we go. It is made in Meyersdale. It has no superior. It has the proper blending, the right flavor, the best materials, pure, clean, wholesome. It is pleasant and refreshing. It is produced by Master Hand, an expert in his line. We are confident we're giving you the best value for your money. Send your orders to Meyersdale Brewing Company, and you can call them at 42. I love that. Phone 42. Another time. So we're going to see a few more ads. I think it's just, and again, start look as you see the ads. You're going to start seeing some themes I've already mentioned pop up a little bit. All right. 1908. Now, interesting. This is by the Pittsburgh Brewing Company, that big conglomerate I've just mentioned, but it's appearing in the Meyersdale Republican. So why is that? And why is it talking about beer drinking Germany, the healthiest of nations? In Munich, the consumption of beer is over 2 pints a day for every man, woman, and child. Grains in the beverage. And you've got, you know, some of Germany's leading figures in science, in art, etc., etc. So again, because of the German influence in the development of beer from 1850 on and the running and operation of breweries, the brewers associations are promoting the German connection as being very, very positive and developing a superior product that you need to buy. So that's in our Republican, right? And again, think about what's going on when you think about temperance and prohibition when you read this ad. You drink it moderately. You drink it because you know it won't hurt you. On the contrary, it will do you good. Sue Porter has never hardly tasted a beer in her life. She hates it, so that's what I say. Meyersdale beer is food and drink. One of the things they started emphasizing at the national level against temperance and prohibition was that beer was nutritious. And so you start seeing these themes. Food and drink gives nourishment and strength to the system. You ought to have a case of Meyersdale beer in your house for family use. Again, call 42. All right, Jen. The Christmas greeting in 1908, we won't go, let's skip that one, because we're running out. Pure, wholesome, refreshing beer made, again, back to the theme, making Meyersdale famous is, we missed it when we didn't go back after Prohibition. I'm just playing. But listen to this when you're talking about health and nutrition. As a spring tonic, you can drink nothing more refreshing and invigorating. It aids digestion, gives nourishment and strength to the body, and tones up the entire system. Order a case of Kreitzberger now. Now, Kreitzberger is a bit of a mystery to me. From what I can tell, he and his family lived off the Salisbury B&O line. He was involved in the construction and development and operation of the brewery. But I can't find a lot of detail about it. But apparently he was significant enough that they named one of their beers after him. Have a Kreitzberger. And I'll talk about that more later. You'll certainly enjoy it, all right? And the patrons, they said, would say, let's go down where the Kreitzberger flows, which could be wherever Kreitzberger is on tap. So what style of beer it was, I can't tell. I haven't found out anything, but Kreitzberger was the bomb. Okay? And so Meyersdale Brewers and bottles the famous Meyersdale beer and porter, noted for purity and healthfulness. It's termed liquid food, made with choice spring water, Kreitzberger brand. It's unsurpassed for family use, folks. I mean, how can you get any better? And try our porter while you're at it. So Kreitzberger, again, is an interesting figure for me. I'm still working on. I did find out, of course, the brewery had a cooperage and had a master carpenter as a cooper to keep the barrels in repair. Ken and I were talking about this. It's not that probably the brewery was actually making their own barrels. Those are probably coming from somewhere else, or maybe they had a contract with Meyersdale Planing or someone else. But they needed someone to keep these things in repair because they're rolled around, they're beat up, etc. So they had a cooper. His name was John Wilhelm, and he lived in Berkeley Mills. And he lived until 1925. So another connection. I don't know if any of you guys have a John Wilhelm connection or a Wilhelm connection, Berkeley Mills, but that may be him. But he was the cooper. He was the cooper. And he may, who knows, he may have touched his barrel or worked on his barrel. All right? And again, something, I just noticed this. I was in Ireland a few years ago with my wife, and everywhere there's Guinness. It's good for you. What does that sound like? It's for strength. I mean, some things just don't change. So it's just funny. Again, our ancestors, they were clever. All right? So here's a few other ads. I won't dwell on them. It's a pleasant reflection. So ladies, you need to be drinking Meyersdale beers here, because it's for you. All right? Finally, one of the first disasters that hits the brewery, you all heard about it. They called it the storm of cyclonic fury. I mean, I think it was a tornado from everything I've read. But in 1910 and Saturday afternoon, and that's what it looked like. I think as you come up Grant Street from the Garrett area, you would have seen this, I think. And this is what would have been facing the road here, and then this side would be Grant Street. The railroad tracks would be going this way, and that's the small building, the lower wood plank building. It took the roof off. The greatest damage in town was done to the brewery, the Robert Spence House, we'll talk about in a second, and Duncas's Theater. And you know, I was reading about Duncas's Theater. That was one of the most spectacular theaters in the whole region for a long, long time. It was apparently just well equipped, and it was beautiful, etc., etc. So the storm really hit it, and it hurled the roof against the Spence House and some of it as far as Ollinger Street extension. The good news was that 1,800 to 2,500 kegs of beer was saved.
Miracle.
There was an engineer actually his name was Tom Dixon, who was in the building at the time, who was a very portly man who was able to get against a wall and not get hurt. And there were several other employees that were in the building in the lower part of the building. No one got hurt, amazingly. So, but again, the beer was saved. Next one. This is what another view of that roof looks like from further down as you went around the side. So you can see that. And there's the Spence House, where some of the roof was just thrown into the Spence House and it took off part of the Spence House. Now, I think...
Yeah.
Go ahead. I think this is that house. And again, I know some of the roof lines changed a little bit, but I think, and this is inhabited right now, and I'm not trying to be insulting, but I think this is the house. And that was the Spence House at that point in time. And you can see it very clearly as you come into Meyersdale from the Garrett side.
You have a first name on the Spence.
Robert.
Oh, thank you.
And again, so the storm happened in June. Did I say June? So many things get. June of 1910, but apparently, according to the Sanborn map, in September of that same year, it looks like they're back in business. There's nothing that indicates in any of the reading I've done that they were out of business for too long. And again, like we've seen earlier, they were up and making beer in 10 months from ground zero, and so there's no reason to think they couldn't have been up and running in a few months, and continuing to go. So you can see they've got, you can see all the equipment. All right? Changing the guard. So the Connellsville crew begins to age, and the first one of the major players in the Connellsville capital investment part was Thomas Mann. He was the superintendent of the brewery for 9 years. He immigrated from Ireland as a child. So the Connellsville influence is very Irish, except for the master brewer they brought in, John Hartung, who was from Germany. He learned carpentry, and again, the reason I'm telling this story is just looking at our ancestors and the kinds of things they did to make their way is phenomenal. Yeah. So he learned carpentry, bookkeeping. He actually worked for Frick up in Pittsburgh. And he had then he started a grocery store in Connellsville, and so when he took the job here as superintendent, he lived at the old Slicer Hotel. So he didn't have a home here, he lived at the Slicer. And he also joined the Loyal Order of Moose. So he was again, a lot of these guys got involved in the community, which is kind of neat to see. He was known as a gentleman and a poet.
You go let Mark in.
And just very, very good businessman. Next one. They had a small strike, I found, that was fascinating. It lasted less than a week, and it was over $5.50 that had been taken away from 9 people. So 9 people, there were total reduction in salary had been $5.50. Now, I'm not trying to make fun of that. It's just interesting. That was a lot of money to people doing that kind of work. So they got with their union boss and they struck. It didn't last long. So this is what's fascinating to me. There was 9 men, they struck less than a week. This is what the paper actually says. The drought, was broken Wednesday afternoon, and now the foamy fluid brewed by master brewer John Hartung again gurgles cheerfully down union as well as non-union gullets at 5 cents per schooner. How can you beat that? Also, Brewmeister Hartung, Jimmy Dixon, and Harvey Stahl are again able to sleep the sound slumber of the just with nothing on but their pajamas, instead of catching only 40 winks of sleep now and then with their work harness on their backs. So this is management. And so they were having to do all the work while the 9 guys were out on strike. So, fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. But that's the only strike I ever found associated so far with the brewery. And it was less than a week. And they resolved it. Again, more ads, a warm weather friend, beer. All right, let's keep going. Changing the Guard continues. Again, Michael Hurley. He'd been the largest investor from Connellsville. He was the money man. And he was the president of the brewery here. He was the largest property owner in Connellsville. So he had some resource. He was also born in Ireland in 1832, immigrated in 1864 with his wife Honora. He started work as a common laborer in the oil industry in Pennsylvania. And then got into railroad construction. He was on a railroad construction crew. And then he became a hotelier in Ursina, how do you say that? Ursina, thank you. And eventually Connellsville. In spite of all his involvement in brewing, he never took a drink in his life.
Wow.
Never took a drink in his life. He was also the president of South Connellsville Lumber and a stockholder in the first and the second national banks. So he was quite accomplished coming up from grassroots. He and Honora had 11 kids. And after her death in 1901, he married an Anna Weber or Weber, I'm not sure how to say that, of Meyersdale. So he married a Meyersdale girl. I don't know if any of you guys know a W-E-B-E-R or not.
There used to be a Weber that owned our house where we live now.
Could be.
He was the previous owner.
Yeah. Wow. So Michael Hurley was the big money. All right. This is the only time I was able to find something about how much beer were these guys making. So this was a report that was in the commercial in 1915 and number of barrels. And so you can see that the total amount of beer that Somerset County, this is for Somerset County. So Somerset County in 1914 drank 39,000 barrels of beer. But Meyersdale's production is fairly modest compared to Rockwood Jenner and Winburn. Winburn was a pretty new brewery. I think they had fresher equipment and doing some other things. But Meyersdale, that's so 1914. That's where we are as the war breaks out. Almost 6,000 barrels of beer. Relatively small operation. I don't know if they'd been bigger at some point or not. I don't know how their production curve went because I haven't been able to find that anywhere. But I'm still looking. All right. All right, hardly enough. One stein between 2 people is hardly enough. Both men and women enjoy a nice cooling draught of our delicious lager beer. So it's good for all of us, men and women. So let's go. Here's another one. New Year's ad, 1915. Here's to you, to me, and beer, and here's to a very happy new year. Yes. So, all right. And finally, another one. Again, just elevating the excellence of the beer and how it's good for whatever ails you, basically. All right. The last change in the guard I wanted to mention with the Connellsville group was John Dixon. And again, we think from the other things I've read, I think he was the president also of the Pittsburgh Brewing Company, which was the largest brewing consolidation in Pennsylvania at that time. So he's no small player, but he's also the main and one of the main cogs in Meyersdale. He was born in Ireland, married Anna Mann of Connellsville. You remember I mentioned Thomas earlier, and so that was that connection. They had 6 kids. He had a hotel from 1880 until his death. So that's kind of there seems to be a connection between hotels, bars, beer. So, his son Jimmy Dixon, you've seen before, he's here from the very beginning when Connellsville came in, kind of running things. That's his son. And he was just very well known and respected. All right. And again, just to say that both the Latrobe folks that came here and the Connellsville people that were involved here, in all the newspaper articles I've read, they were all represented very positively, as very genial, as gentlemen, as respectful. And again, when you look at, I've looked at a number of obituaries. When these Connellsville folks have died, Meyersdale people are going to Connellsville for the funerals. And there's a Meyersdale pastor, Catholic pastor, that's going to Meyersdale for the funeral. So there was an interaction there that we may have lost, I'm not sure, but there was certainly a strong connection, and it was very positive. It wasn't a negative at all. The last disaster that kind of shuts things down is the fire in 1917. And again, the Republican and the commercial have some different details about it. Some are about the same, some are a little different. It happened in March. It was 2 degrees. It was very cold. It made it very, very difficult to fight the fire. Loss, the Republican says the loss is estimated at $8,000 to $10,000. I don't know. The fire company and the citizens fought the blaze. They saved the engine room, the ice plant, and the refrigeration area. So the lot they saved. Interesting, Reichs and Sons Furniture horse team was the one that pulled the hose and ladders over from the South Side Station and the main firehouse. And they said there were hundreds of women and children watching the blaze, and there were a lot of citizens trying to help the volunteers fight the blaze. Jimmy Dixon said they probably would rebuild. John Hartung was able to rescue his Blue Devil motorcycle. Now, I've been looking for what that is, and I can't tell if it's a motor configuration kind of attached to an early bicycle, or if it's something different. So if any of you can find something like that, it was called a Go Devil, and he called it a Blue Devil. All right. So the commercial represented the fire, said the watchman on the top floor saw no fire, which is where the fire started, 10 minutes before they called for the alarm to be rung. Started in the grain storage area. Again, some of the same reports, saved machinery and stock on the lower floor. The walls stayed up. They saved the engine house, most of the machinery, and the beer. That's important. They saved the beer. And the commercial says the loss was estimated at $50,000. That's quite a difference. I don't know how to interpret that. This is what was neat, though, about the fire company here. The fire company responded promptly and in larger numbers than usual and made all possible effort to save all the property possible. There we go. Meyersdale fire from the very beginning. Rocking the world.
And the beer.
And the beer.
The beer was there.
Right. What happened to the brewery?
Source, right.
After 1917, I have a couple thoughts about that. This is the Sanborn map from 1919. So this is 2 years after the fire. And it looks like it's been basically rebuilt. But interestingly, the note that they make is manufacturing ice. I'm not sure they're making beer because Prohibition begins in January. And of course, Prohibition had been passed the year before. It went into effect January 17th, 1920. So I think it was probably and I'll tell you this, so John Hartung, who's the brewmaster that I've been continuing to mention, it says in one of the documents that he retired. It looks like after the fire, he retired. Because in another document I found not too long ago, this is the American Malting Company 1918 Brewers Catalog. They have a different brewmaster mentioned. So I think they went back to making some beer. But by the time this rolls around, Prohibition is coming, it's done, it's certain, and all they're doing is making ice. So, and they have a big ice operation. All right, next one. What happened eventually? There was a sheriff's sale in December 5th of 24. They sold a lot off that belonged to Jimmy Dixon on Grant Street. It wasn't his house. He was still living in a house on Grant. And I think that may be the house you've got listed. I think that might be the house you have listed. And the property of the whole Meyersdale Brewery went into the sheriff's sale. So, again, Prohibition, what you do with a brewery, they weren't big enough to maybe diversify enough. A lot of the large breweries started making canned malt so that they could sell that to home brewers. They started making ice cream. They started packaging and bottling all kinds of other products. They kept up their technology and they kept up their workforce and some of their expertise. And they started making near beer, 0.5%. But those are the big guys. The little ones like this, that would have been a lot more difficult. So it looks like it just went into tax sale. And finally, 1930, the Sanborn map. Again, that might be the yellow house, Grant Street. Formerly Meyersdale Brewing Company, walls only. So all that's left, all the outbuildings are missing, and they said just only the walls. So in the sheriff's sale, was it purchased? Was probably all the equipment was removed for pennies on the dollar, et cetera, et cetera. So it just went off the map. Next one. What happened to Jimmy Dixon, who kind of really led daily operations from 1904-ish till the end? He built a house on Grant Street near the Legion Post. Married Ms. Madigan of Connellsville. They had 6 kids, lost 1 son during World War II, and were married for 52 years. So pretty good guy. After things went south with the brewery, I found that he was working as a foreman in road construction, but he still came home to Meyersdale for his residence, at least in 1927. Finally, by 1929, I found that he had moved to Washington, D.C. I'm not sure what he was doing, and he died there in 1959. So that's what happened to Jimmy. But, again, they never really tried to cut ties with Meyersdale unless they just had to. And in the 1920 census, they listed his job as running an ale house. He still claimed the beer industry, even though Prohibition had set in. So here's how we're going to end tonight. I want you to meet John Hartung, because he was just a fascinating figure. He was born in Germany. He came to this country in the mid-1880s, and he was an expert brewer. And he came to work with that Connellsville connection in 1904 and stayed here and worked here until after the fire. We know that. Because after the fire, he took a day off and went to an automobile show in Pittsburgh. I have that. So and somebody up there tried to sell him a car for $30,000, and he thought the better of it. He had a little money. He probably could have done that. That was a lot of money back then. But he had 2 children with his wife. I don't know his wife's name. I couldn't find that anywhere. But she died in 1899 after they come to this country, and he never remarried. But he remained, after he retired, after the fire, he remained here in Meyersdale. He had like all the brewery folks, it seems like he had a house on Grant Street. And when he died, he was living in an apartment in the house and renting the rest of the house. I don't know to whom. He was known for his courteous, refined manner and his stylish attire. They called him the Bonnie Brewmaster, and his nickname, because he had a big booming voice, Boom Bay. John Hartung, Boom Bay, and he had, like I said, kind of a portly architecture. All right. He was reported to have owned the first car in Meyersdale, a Maxwell Runabout, and this is one from 1910. And you can see why he would not want to use this during the winter. And so during the summers, though, he gave joyrides to women and children, probably women, to be emphasized. He was, yeah, never mind. I don't want to get incorrect. He was a ladies' man, but apparently very appropriate. And during the winter, he took up roller skating in Reich's Auditorium, which also became known as the Summer Garden. So what did they do in Reich's Auditorium, which again opened in 1909? It was a marvelous facility. So you could do what there? You could roller skate. You could dance. You could see a moving picture, not a movie, but a moving picture. Yeah, and you could play basketball. So that's the old, that's the old State Strand, what's left of that operation. But apparently it was magnificent. And he learned to roller skate there. So here's where this guy starts coming in, all right? The owner, one of the Reichs who ran the auditorium or the summer garden, wanted to know if John Hartung would race a roller skating bear. And so I started looking into that. John was a very affable person and very cooperative. This is the Crapspeaks, Carrie, and I can't remember his name right now. They rescued this bear in the Northwest. And while a young bear, what do you call a young bear? A cub. They taught it to roller skate. So they traveled all over the country in that era with this roller skating bear to perform and appear. And so this is one of the ads at the Empire Theater. I'm not sure where the Empire was. Alice Teddy is the bear's name. Alice Teddy comes to Meyersdale, to the Reich Auditorium, to the Summer Garden, and they set up a race with the roller skating bear and roller skating John Hartung, the brewmaster. And it is a treat.
Bear bit him.
So I wanted to read this. The race was for 3 laps around the rink. The man whose business is brewing beer was given a start of a rod, which is about 16 feet, 15 feet, or 2 over brewing bear. But Alice Teddy soon had her human antagonist outdistanced and was winning the race with flying colors when she took a tumble and finished the race on all fours, fully half a lap behind the perspiring brewmaster. Now, I wanted to say too that one of the reasons it was speculated here that Reich, who managed the auditorium, always tried to involve John Hartung there was that there's a rumor that Reich has subsidized John to be a nightly visitor at the auditorium in order to attract the fair sex to the famous Broadway Street resort. Be that there as may, there is always a large feminine contingent at the auditorium when the good-looking but elusive brewmaster is there. And many are the goo-goo eyes that are cast his way. Now, you can't find newspaper writing like that. So, but that's not the end of the story with Alice Teddy and John. The brewmaster kindly consented to run the race over in order to give Bruin another chance to show that bear could beat beer. In the second bout, Alice Teddy kept on her hind legs, and at the finish, the brewmaster was merely an also-ran. So far was he left in the ruck. It was plainly demonstrated that the Beau Brummel of Meyersdale, that's John, Beau Brummel of Meyersdale, was not in the educated bruins class, and that he would better stick to the brewing of beer. So it again, and the article's called Bruin versus Bruin, Bear Beats Beer. That's from that article. Just creative stuff. But so again, John was this very affable figure, loved by the community, etc. Next one. And so I just wanted to tell you, when he retired, he continued to live in his house on Grant Street, drove his Maxwell. In 1921, September, he was trying to connect to the new updated sewer system that was going in the town. And he worked really hard that day. And they speculated, because of maybe excess labor, that they found him dead a day and a half later in his room of heart failure, is what the speculation was. And he is, and this is one of the mysteries we're working on, had no family around here. He had a sister in Connecticut, and he had a son who had actually worked here with him for a little while, for several years in the brewery, who had taken on car repair in Chicago. It took them a while to track those folks down. And they eventually showed up and participated in the funeral. The funeral was managed by Reich. You know, Reich ran a lot of things, including he was an undertaker as well. But he's buried in Union Cemetery. Now, the thing we've been working on, we've been walking the cemetery, I've been walking the cemetery, Jennifer's been out there. He's recorded works, the WPA list in the cemetery, 1934, records over 2,400 graves. And he is in that list. He's listed, and Ken and I talked about this, as John Harting, T-I-N-G, but it's easy to see an I and a U get kind of confused. And the only thing that was noted in the records that was going to be on his inscription was John Hartung, father, and then his date of birth and date of death, the years of each. We kind of know the area where he might be, but we don't know if that stone marker was a plate that's gotten covered over or is now missing for some reason. But I had wanted so badly to bring you a picture of his stone. But we've been looking for that for quite a while. But we know he's at Union Cemetery. So, I've taken a lot of your time tonight. And I hope that one thing I just wanted to come out about this is just that there's a unique community spirit among all these people. They were mostly, it seems like, very good people. There were great relationships between this community and Connellsville, particularly with those families. And apparently, we put out a pretty doggone good product in the time that we were operating. And it was quite well respected. And again, there's plenty of bottles around showing that somebody was drinking it. And that's kind of fun. So that's all I've got for you. And if you had any pressing questions, or if you want to ask me something later, feel free. And again, I'm not an expert. I'm still learning. There's rabbit trails I still want to follow on this, for sure. And whenever I open up a Sanborn map, I say, I want to know more about that place or that place. I mean, they're kind of crazy making. But if anybody has a pressing question you want to say out loud.
When did electricity come to Meyersdale Borough? That would have been the beginning of the end of the ice world.
Yeah.
It's a good question, Dave.
They electrified, I can tell you this, they electrified the brewery around 1905, 1906, somewhere in there. I know that, but I don't know about the rest of the community. Do anybody else have an answer there? Yeah, I'm just curious too. I don't know. I mean, again, I think all of us know about the water, which was very forward thinking, but I don't know about that.
I would bet that the outlying areas, though, probably still needed ice because rural electrification didn't come in until much later.
Right, right. Yeah, and again, it's gonna take people, I mean, refrigerators probably early on, just like anything new coming out, it's pretty expensive until it becomes mass produced, et cetera. So I'm sure ice boxes were used for a long time.
There's, the Meyersdale commercial in 1898 had written about the Mountain Electric Supply Company, which was a huge building just down the road from the brewery that had like 127 windows and like, I want to say it was 4 stories, don't hold me to that. In one of our Power Library collections online, we have a photograph that's in our archives where you can, in the distance, see this Mountain Electric Supply Company. But the Meyersdale commercial in 1898, when they were talking about all of the accomplishments of Meyersdale, this electric supply company was referred to as Meyersdale's one failure. Now that was 1898, so I don't know. I mean, that much I know, but the whole story around it, I don't.
What's the answer to number 9?
What is number 9? I'm sorry.
When baseball games occurred during television.
Oh, yeah,
The opposing side was named.
so it's interesting. There were 2, brewers versus bartenders. You might suspect that. The other is not politically correct.
Oh.
Fats versus leans. And guess which side John Hartzog was on?
So the answer is C.
CNA, really CNA.
Oh, okay.
They were both team names that were that appear in some of the newspapers. But again, when you read the article, you know, they don't really put people. I mean, I know that's a derogatory term now, but it wasn't seen that way then, and it was just more for fun, and it was described like, you know, we were bringing the best possible effort to this, you know, deal, and the other team was described in glowing terms and things like that. So it wasn't quite the same. So I think, is any other questions about that? Oh, you know, we talked about the disasters, group of immigrants, and again, the German influence.
That was one of the few questions I knew.
Yeah. So, the only beer I don't know that they produce any of the Weiss beer. I don't think they did. I never saw anything about that. What we would call a wheat beer. So, but thanks for participating, for playing along, for listening.
Hey Lee, I think it'd be interesting if anyone has any Meyersdale. I bet you would love to collect some of their bottles if they aren't wanting them or, you know, passing them on. They could get in touch with the library here and they could get in contact with you or have more information for your amazing research you've done.
Well, that would be, thank you, Martha. That would be certainly appreciated. But also, just, you know, like I said, I know I ain't from these parts, but I love it up here, and you guys have a community and a history that's just so enriched, so rich, and, you know, something to be proud of. And I'm just happy to kind of just celebrate some of these things and the people that were a part of it, and honor their work and memory. So any connection you have that might help me in my continued journey of exploring these interrelationships, please let me know, let Jennifer know, and I'd be grateful, you know, to keep tracking down things, because it's a lot of fun.
But not in the winter. You're really not here in the winter.
Yeah, it's harder to ride the bike in the winter. We both got, Sue and I both have Subarus now, so we can get up here a little better. Yes.
There's at least 8 different brewing models in Meyersdale. 8 different ones. I have 2 ports that are different. I had actually a clear brewing bottle. I may have it yet. I have quite a number.
Yeah.
But it's quite an interesting collection.
Well,
And I also have a keg from Meyersdale Brewing, but it's only half that size.
Yeah, like a pony cab. Is it, it's one piece. Of course, and again, this was donated to the museum, to the
Yeah.
Historical Society. But that's fascinating. That's fascinating.
I got most of them from this lady's father.
Huh,
He was a great bottle digger, and at his auction, I bought
yeah.
a couple
Yeah.
cases.
And and of course, Meyersdale had Meyersdale Bottling Company and had Hosteller Bottling Company, at least those two. There might have been another.
Coca-Cola.
And they bottled Coca-Cola, which was rare, and that was a rare find there. So that was huge.
Yes, the lady.
So yeah, I don't know much about bottles. I don't. The only thing I know is when I know you can kind of look on the edge and find indications of, read those and you figure out who made them and roughly when, and sometimes it's on the bottom. But and you're welcome to come look at any of these. So, yes, sir.
Do you have any location of where the 6 different hotels were?
They're all-
I know the Colonial and maybe the Slicer, but the others.
The American House, the American would have been, I'm pretty sure the American House, which is roughly where the Kidney Center was, where
Patsy Toscano's.
Patsy's used to be.
Okay.
That was Patsy's
was the
Bar,
American.
Toscano's was
Yeah.
prior to that the American
Okay,
House.
down there.
Yeah. Keystone, I was sitting here asking the same question of myself, John, because I'm always testing myself. There used to be one out on Salisbury Street. Roughly, I think, where the nursing home, not really nursing home, but
Personal care.
personal care.
Johnson Personal?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, I think.
Johnson.
It's Johnson's.
Okay. I don't know if that was the Keystone though. I'm very well might be incorrect on that.
But you can come to Jennifer
Yeah,
in the PA room
Can dig
and
into
get on
it.
and you can get the Sanborn maps online, but you pull those up and you'll have, there's a world that opens up in terms of location of these places and when they were there. I mean, it doesn't give you every detail, but they're great.
Yeah,
I've
and you
seen
can
them up
actually
to
also
date.
access the Sanborn maps through our library's website with a library card. I think the Union might have been up Main Street. Again, don't hold me to that, but I think the Union might have been up Main Street. I'm trying to remember which.
Were they all around at the same time, or?
At that
did
point,
some
they were,
precede
right?
others?
Yeah, those
They
six,
were.
those 6 I mentioned were all here in 1914 when they were licensed,
Okay.
relicensed. So that era from there were probably a lot of crossover between maybe 1890, 1895 to probably 1915, 1920 for sure. And again, when you look on the Sanborn maps, which I think you'd love doing, some of the hotels, and I've looked, this was another project, so I haven't gone there, but some of the buildings, and they're kind of written to scale. Some of the bar areas are pretty big, where they, the gathering places, because they were community gathering places. And so, I don't know that Meyersdale ever had a beer garden per se. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that, but.
Not legal ones.
Yeah, maybe. But those 6 were, like I said, 1914.
Was it mainly men that gathered there, or were women there also?
That's another project. I don't know, Gary.
I do know that when I was studying the suffrage movement, a lot of times a lot of the suffragists were also part of the temperance movement. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I kind of picture it being more men than women. I don't know that for sure though.
But you can tell from they're trying to appeal.
Yeah.
They're trying to appeal. How far that went, it's hard to tell.
Back at that time, Meyersdale and Salisbury both were much larger than they are now. There was businesses everywhere. And Mike McKenzie from Salisbury does a lot of searching with the newspapers. And he has the same thing you do. it can be in more than one paper, but there's a conflict of events. You know, he runs into the same thing because he said, then you'll run into something and then it puts you on, another trail. So when he's researching something, he said he can get lost,
Oh, my.
following another lead.
Yeah.
But like the towns were filled, like West Salisbury was
What,
filled.
I think
buildings and
maybe,
stuff.
to your point, I think it'd be neat for one of you guys to come work with Jennifer on the Sanborn maps and do a Sanborn map overview of Meyersdale from like 1892 to 1920. That would be fascinating. I mean, and that may be too much of a time frame, but because the maps are they're so rich with information, but that'd be a great project.
Well, that's one thing that Kyle Davis and I, we focused on just for a slide or two in our recent program from, the 1891-92 Sanborn map, I think was 2 sheets.
Mm-hmm.
And then by 1920, it was 10 sheets. So it had grown that much in less than 3 decades. But yeah, it was kind of amazing the way Meyersdale grew in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
Do you have a question, Sam?
It's not a question, it's a comment.
Yeah.
My great-great-great-grandfather owned the American
Oh yeah.
hotel.
Wow.
Yep, Sam learned not too long
And he was
ago,
from
right?
Germany.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sam. Well, again, I don't want to delay you. Thank you for coming. It's great to see faces I do know and some I don't. I really appreciate it.
And we thank Lee. I mean, I asked him and he jumped on it, and he's obviously, as you can see, he's spent a lot of time researching. And it's interesting the things he points out about Meyersdale. And I don't want to put Ken on the spot, but I'm going to. There's a man and woman here, Ken and Kath, sitting back there. And this is fascinating. Okay, they are from England, and they've been visiting Meyersdale on and off for decades. Ken's a fan of trains, but Ken's been spending some time the past 2 days in the Pennsylvania room because now he just wants to learn more about Meyersdale. And at one point this afternoon, I said to Ken, it is, think about this. It's kind of fascinating. They're over here all the way from England, and they're spending a couple weeks in different places, but it's a huge country, right? And they're choosing to spend a couple days here in Meyersdale and visiting our Pennsylvania room because they want to learn more about our community. So it's kind of neat, right? And we're glad they're here, and we're thankful for Lee for saying, yes, Jen, we'll help you out. And maybe down the road we can talk him into another presentation.
Yeah.
All I need now is just help getting this back to the car.
Yeah.
I'll do that tomorrow.
I watched him rolling it out here.
Oh
Like,
man,
roll
I got
out
it in
the
here. I
barrel.
rolled this baby.
I know, we had it in the Pennsylvania room all day, and then, about 6 o'clock, Lee showed up, and he's rolling the barrel down the aisle, and I said, yeah, it's not every public library where you see someone.
There's a song.
Well, I know.
Roll
Rolling
out
the
the
barrel.
barrel, we'll have a barrel of fun.
So it was a fun evening, and we thank you very much.
Thank you very